All right, so George, today's focus, this client was somebody who was really well qualified, but I think the lesson is on how plans can change as the process goes on.
Yeah, and the important point is that this client in particular, he was a first-time client for you, but not for me.
Yeah.
I've worked with this client multiple times for different types of properties, so he had a real good idea.
I've heard about him for a year or two prior to actually getting in contact with him.
Because he's that kind of a client where he's the dream client in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Well prepared, knows what he wants. It's not a big conversation. Like, we don't have to do this big setup of got to go out and find a place. And oh my gosh, we're driving around. I'm doing 30 showings.
Yep.
I'm doing 3 or 4 showings with him, and he's probably writing an offer almost every time. So in that case, like introducing him to you, this is a leg up client, meaning there's not a whole lot we have to think about here, but I'm going to put everything on pause and say, I made this mistake with him because of the fact that I was so used to him knowing what he wants, how he wants to do it. He's not an overly involved client. It's hey, this property looks like it's going to make sense. Let's go take a look, and confirming things. For him, the main thing was always just an affirmation of, does this meet what I want? Am I ready to write an offer?
Yeah. Yeah. And by the time, I got to him, by the time he came to me, everything you're saying, it was the same. Super, super easy client. Income is really strong. Everything you care about. Income was strong, stable employment, been at the same job, had money in the bank. I mean,
yeah,
so
like this
for
right
us,
now, he sounds boring as hell.
He sounds boring because the conversation isn't about, oh, well, we're going to do this thing to try to make this work or that. It was, do you want to do 5% down, 10% down, or 20% down?
And on a home search side, he didn't care about the condition of the property. He didn't want a train wreck, but because he's got buddies in the industry, he knows what he's doing. This was one of those where it's like, hey, if it needs some updates, I don't care. That's not it. It's just, I want to be in this area. And location was the only real dominant thing for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times the process does get driven by me a little bit, and that wasn't at all the case on this instance. Right.
So he was one of those where the search was, for me, the least amount of work possible.
Yep.
Because he knew what he wanted. We knew we were looking. Again, we're out there, we're looking, we're writing offers. So like if somebody's watching us talk about this client right now, they're thinking, what's the big deal? This guy's a walk in the park. Well, he was all the way to the end.
Yeah. I mean, once we were under contract, the rest of the process with me, I think we closed him in
almost
20
4 weeks.
days, 25 days. Yeah, something like that.
And that's with title search being done.
Yeah, extremely fast. So from start to finish, the process from qualifying him, getting under contract, bringing him through, a dream client. Couldn't have been easier. So absolutely, if you're watching this, you might be wondering what happened, and it wasn't at the closing table even.
No, we got him to closing, no problem, sailed right through closing. I actually introduced him to a different attorney, and we thought that might be a hiccup, and it wasn't, and so all of it went fine. The issue was after the purchase, and after the purchase, that's when the location became the problem.
Yeah.
And it became a problem because of some environmental factors that he was unaware of, that we did not see during any of the showings or during the inspection. And there was no real appraisal concerns. So that wasn't an issue. But it came down to, because he encountered some environmental concerns, and I'm using the word environmental to be sensitive to it, because obviously we're not going to get into the absolute facts. We can't.
Yeah, we don't need to be deep in details on all this stuff, but
no,
things changed.
Things changed. Well, so a year goes by, and he calls me up and he says, "Yeah, I got an issue." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Everything we talked about." And we talked about doing a lot to that house, because this was I'm going to be here 15 to 20 years. A year goes by and he's ready to say, "I'm done."
Yeah, yeah, and I can go back to him, and we've talked to him since, and nothing's changed with qualifications. Again, he's gonna be so prepared for this next process again, but obviously we learned something from this.
So the lesson learned, and for me, I go back again. This is because I know him, because we've sailed through so many other transactions. This was something where he was purchasing for himself. Okay. And the mistake that we made was I kept asking him a number of questions, in particular about location, about what his plans were, about his timeline, and he convinced me. He convinced me that it was all good.
Probably convinced himself.
I think that was the majority of it. And so for anybody who's thinking about buying, you got to start thinking about the fact that when a realtor says to you, what's your plan for the house? You know, how long do you think you're going to be here? And hopefully a realtor is doing their job and asking that kind of a question. They
Yeah.
should be saying, what do you think you're going to do? Because the minute you see a house that needs improvements in any way, or if you've got a growing family concern or anything of that nature, the realtor should be asking, what are you going to do? Because it's not the day one purchase or even the first 365 days. It's 5 years down the road. Have you thought that far ahead? And for him, he thought he had thought that far ahead.
Yeah.
Like you said, he convinced himself.
And that's
probably.
why sometimes I think what's really important for us is asking questions multiple times, almost to the point of being annoying, and to
Yeah.
try to get to the question under the question, or
Yep.
what their actual thoughts and feelings are about a certain aspect of the sale, because it's not always obvious to you, to me, or to the client up front unless they hear it phrased the right way, and then they go, whoa, wait a second, I am further away from XYZ than I thought I was. Oh, whoa, wait a second, I did want more land. This isn't going to work.
Yeah. And so that last point there about the land, that was
Okay.
the major issue. He
Yeah.
discovered that this just was not enough land for what he wanted to do. The house doesn't fit for that purpose. The investment into the house now doesn't make sense. So for him, you know, and for me, that lesson that was learned was I should have been more probative. I should have been more of a pain in the ass to him than I was. And it just kept asking and asking because in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, I can't believe this is the house that he wants to buy.
Yeah. Well, and so he's moving on to the next house, and we are moving on to the next lesson learned.
Yeah, that we are.